All right. I know that we've got the case study to talk about, and you all are going to be presenting your group's information. But before we do that, there is one thing that is really important, and I put it at the very front end of the agenda for tonight. And that is, last semester, Gardner-Webb was really, really lenient about the incompletes. Some of you are pretty far behind, and it's not most of you that are actually online with us, but it's maybe some in your group that are pretty far behind. So what I really need to stress to you is they are not going to allow that this time. They are going to, you have to have 80% of what is required completed before they will allow me to give you an incomplete. Now, what they are going to do, which is different and will put you behind a whole semester, is if you do not have at least 80% or the majority of your work completed by the end of this semester when grades are due, then they're going to take you out of 605. They're going to put you back in 603 as an audit student. And then you will have to pay for auditing. It will not be the same charge that you're currently paying to take the class the first time. And then you'll be working with whoever is teaching that course. And then, of course, they will have to share the information with, it would be me if I'm the one who gives you, well, no, yes, I guess it would have to be with me, or they'll work something out to make sure that the audit teacher gives you a grade at the end. So I wanted to make sure that I stressed that. Dr. Lamb went over it in one of the sessions he did, but I wasn't sure that it was real, that everybody caught it. So I wanted to make sure that I told you. So last semester they were extremely lenient because of the snowstorms and because of the hurricanes that everybody was dealing with, but they're not going to be that lenient this semester. So please use your time on weekends, use any time that you have to get caught up. And I will tell you that when I was in graduate school many years ago, I took some days off when I was overwhelmed. I had personal leave days, and I took some days off and would maybe take a Friday off and have a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to work on it. So if you want to get your licensure this summer, you will get this done by the end of this semester. So please, please let me emphasize that and make sure you all understand it. If you have group members that are way behind, make sure that you point out this information that I put it in writing, but I also wanted to make sure that I reminded everybody. Now, let's go to any questions that you have right now, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. Any questions that any of you have?
I want with Dr. Todd, now that she can hear me.
Okay.
Just to share with me again what she was explaining about the SCIP and not having the information coming from the community. I do have.
We can. Why don't we do that at the end? If Dr. Todd would just leave the meeting open at the end, and we can talk about it, because I'm working on your paper, but I don't want to interrupt her class.
Okay. Problem.
All right, but I do want to address that, because one of the things in the few that I've had a chance to read, I was actually finished and caught up by last Thursday, but I'm behind again. So, but one of the things that I have noticed is there is information missing about what the community feels about your school. Okay. And there is I can remember, you've got to find this information in a quick manner. So if there's not some kind of study that's been used for Title I or for your EC application, then you're going to have to figure out a way to get that information. And while it still may not be accurate information, one of the quickest ways that I suggest, and Dr. Tillman may feel differently, but I suggest one of the quickest ways is to use a focus group. And,
Amen.
and we have not talked about this because I've been gone almost all day. But I suggest that because you can get some parents from PTA, you can get some community members to come in. Doesn't have to be a large group, but you just need to know what they're thinking in questions that are related to the, you know, what they are thinking about the school. And so when you're looking at that task, that's a quick way. We can talk about that. Someone probably needs to mute their phones because I think somebody's at a ball game and I hear the cheering. So if there's any way to mute that one, please do. Thank you. And so I still okay. All right, I think I've got them muted now. Where I think the ball game was going on. So anyway, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. But you do have to have that information about what the whole piece is, internal and external. If you just have what the teachers feel, then that's totally internal, and you don't have anything about the external piece. So make sure we've got to have some of that information, and we've got to find it out some way. One other thing that I want to, before we jump into the SCIP Task 2, I want you to just remind you, for each of the case studies, each of you writes your own reflection. The reflection is based on your group discussion and how you felt about the interactions among your group and your final decision. You don't have to answer all of those questions that you answered in your group. Only one person in the group has to turn in the Zoom information and the PowerPoint or whatever information that you all chose and how you chose to put it together. So, and I've asked you to each time list your group members so that I'll know that everybody has participated in that. Should there be a situation when someone did not participate with your group and they did not help you at all with developing anything, then I do ask them to answer the questions. But everybody each time has to do the reflection, because it's after the process, and basically you're looking at, okay, how did I feel about this and what did I learn from this? And so it doesn't have to be lengthy. A page is probably sufficient. So I want to make sure that we understand that, because there were some questions about that. There's also some things that when I take time and Dr. Tillman takes time and we give you suggestions as to what you need to redo, we expect it to be redone. So when I see the paper put together, I don't want to see it without those changes made, because that tells me that I just did that for nothing, because you all had already decided how you were going to do it and you weren't going to listen to us anyway. So, you know, we're not trying to tell you exactly what to do, but we are trying to give you our best guess as to how we can get you successfully through this task. And so that's why we'll tell you those things. And so if we find sections missing, that's what I'll tell you. If I find grammar errors, that's what I will tell you. And I'll tell you to go back and check it and to fix it. And so we really do expect that you make those changes whenever we do that. If you had a really, really low grade, as in sometimes somebody will only turn in half of what the information is, then for me, I'd like to see when you added the rest of the information in there so that I can see that you actually did the task, and then I will increase your grades. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Now, I wanted to remind you that this is what Dr. Lamb has told us we have to have for task 1. He wants to see 3 things addressed, and I'm certain I went over this before, but I just want to remind you. You have to address short-term goals. You have to address the long-term goals in your recommendations for prompt 1. And then for prompt 2, you have to address a recommendation for your school improvement plan. Now remember, this whole thing is about gaps in communication. It is not whether the teachers think your principal is the best on earth or the sorriest on earth. It's talking about just that one little section of teacher working conditions information that deals with communication within the school. And then if you don't have a document about how the communication between the school and the community is, the community includes your students, parents, and then any business community and any other churches that support your school. So, you know, keep that in mind as you're working on that. And it is communication that you're looking at. You're not looking at other facets of the leadership of your principal. That if it's going to be addressed, will be addressed in different places. But this is dealing with the communication piece. Now, the first thing I want to do as far as introducing the resource identification, for this task, you are to lead a group of people at your school, and you're to identify the fiscal and the human resources that are necessary to complete the SCIP. Now, in one sense of the word, this could be flipped from 2 to 3 because you're having to come to the resources, but that's not the way they put it. And Dr. Tillman and I can't reverse the order. But you almost have to have in mind what you're going to do in your marketing plan as you're looking at your resources. But you also have to always go back to 1 and what you said you were going to look at, what your goals were. So your narrative should describe your leadership role, and it should have funding necessary to accomplish the short-term and the long-term objectives that you've identified, as well as the resources to sustain it. So it's what's going to do to change this, and secondly, how are you going to sustain it? And then the resource identification would also require that you identify the human capital within the school and the community for expertise and talent that would facilitate a successful development and implementation of the SCIP. Now, none of this is new stuff. You've seen it. It's in your handbook. But I just tried to phrase it and put it in very short way for you to look at it. To be proficient, you clearly detail the 3 areas that are below in a supported narrative. Now, make sure you understand. It says supported narrative that reasonably or realistically satisfies the objectives established in the new in the organizational analysis in task 1 in the areas of fiscal and human resources. So this is looking at money. That's another way of saying fiscal and human resources. My bias is that everything in your school comes to you at a price. When you look at your teachers and when you look at the principal and you look at everybody that's on your staff, are they not paid? Of course they are paid. So if you really took an average teacher's salary, or even you could take beginner level teacher's salary, I don't care. And you think this, whatever you're going to do, is going to take 5 hours of their time or 5 hours of 2 people's time, then you just merely figure out that your person, your human resource, that can be averaged out to whatever 5 hours of a teacher's salary would be for that week, you know. So it takes a little bit of math, but what I really want you to understand is basically there's nothing free under the sun that comes to your school. You may not see the money, but it comes to your school through allotments, through the teachers are allotted positions, or it comes to your school because the central office got a pot of money that they can spend on nurses, counselors, coaches for instruction. And they have chosen to send that to your school. And with that, the money comes for that person's salary. There's usually, and it continues to be cut, there's usually money for materials and supplies. So if you're using paper, if you're using toner, that's one of the biggest expenses that there is in a school. Yeah. You know, it costs to do everything that you're going to do. If you're going to do flyers, it costs. How much do you think it's going to cost? That's what I want you to do. I want you to be able to figure out, if you're the principal of the school and you've got to market something, what's it going to cost you and where the money's going to come from? If you've already got the teachers, yes, you don't have to pay them, but that money is coming to your school that you often don't even think about. So that's just one of my biases. I think when you're looking at resource identification, you need to look at all the resources that's coming to your school that you're going to use for this particular plan. So when you look at the items that have to be there for you to be proficient, again, it's the short and long-term fiscal details able to sustain the SCIP, human capital, and the strategic alignment of how the talents of these humans are going to help your SCIP team reach the goals. Now, the human capital does not have to just be teachers and people who work for you. It can be community members. You may have parents who are extremely good at organizing events and doing things for your school. And if that's what you're planning as your long-term event, some type of communication about something at your school, some kind of event to improve something in math or reading or whatever you have chosen, then, you know, if they were working at a job, what would they be paid? So that's one of the things. Human capital would be everybody would take to do this that you're planning. And then what's your role? You're the leader throughout this process, so make sure you deal with your role. And then evidence of a functioning collaborative team. Now this time, normally your evidence goes in your competency folio, but they are asking for evidence that you have a functioning collaborative team. That can be the same team you've used all year, but it can be different if that's what you've chosen for this particular task or this particular artifact, but it can be the same group. So I've already talked a little bit about my bias about that everything that comes to you has a price. And you just need to be aware of the price that's coming to you. You get a lot that your central office is and the state of North Carolina is covering for you. And too many times, and I've seen it because I've been at the county level and I've also been at the school level, and I have heard principals put down the central office and say, you know, I don't get anything. Well, yes, you do. You're getting EC money, you're getting AIG money, you're getting Title I money if your school qualifies, you're getting lunch, so you're getting free and reduced lunch money. So you're getting a lot from the central office. And I have always noticed that the kinder you are to the people at the central office, the more apt you are to get what you need. And sometimes you may get a tad more than what you need because you will work with them. And so it's the story of a little bit of kindness goes a long way. And I actually had one of my supervisors that was at this central office when I was a principal to say, Barbara, you're not like most principals. He said, you recognize when you don't really need something and you don't fight with us. And I said, well, I realize this. You do it based on numbers. And when I don't qualify, that I understand that. He said, but most of the principals don't. So I'm encouraging you to be the kind of principal that looks at things objectively, not just the way you want to do things and not just what fits your lifestyle and your school. You are, unless you're a private school on your own or a charter school that's just on its own, you are part of a system. And we've talked about it briefly before. And that system has to work together for the benefit of whatever location you're working in, whether you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, I don't care. But you've got some form of a system that's working together to provide you resources and also to help you meet the challenges that you meet on a daily basis. They're there for you to call and say, I need help with. And when you decide that it's us against them, do you think they're going to want to come and help you? And if you talk about them, Do you think that they're going to want to come and help you? Because they're going to hear what you say. I can guarantee you it's just like a group of children in a classroom. How many times does someone make sure you know what somebody has said about you? Same thing happens at the principal's level. It happens at every level. So just realize you're working with the whole central office. You're not working against them, and they're not working against you. They're a resource that can help you with any of the things that you face in your school. And I would urge you, if you are going to wind up on television for something, and it's usually not good things that you wind up on television for, make sure you cover that with whoever at your central office has the most experience dealing with the media, because they can help you talk through what you want to point out. And the one thing you always want to point out is facts. You also don't want to come across as you're hiding anything. And you also want to make sure that you don't tell anything that you can't. And so it's a fine line. And sometimes you will still come off looking like, oh, they're hiding something. But you've got to try to be as straightforward as you can and give the amount of information you're allowed to give, but do it in a manner that people will trust you. And you're the face of the school when you're a principal. And so it's many times you're the person that needs to be out there. But you also need to focus your story. You know, they may ask you one set of questions, but if that's not what you want to answer, you start out trying to answer their question, and then you come back around to what you want them to understand. And maybe that point is the safety of your students is the most important thing that there is. And this is what you're providing. So you focus things, especially when you're dealing with the media. All right. Now, any other questions about that? All right. Now we're going to go into your PowerPoint presentations. And so this was case study 3. And what I will allow you to do, whoever is going to share your PowerPoint, if you will just go to the bottom of your screen and hit share and share your screen. And then however your group has decided you're going to present it, we're going to start. And I just went, I knew we didn't have time to wait. So I just went and looked the number of groups we had. And then I took one section and then I went to the other section and I just jumped around. So we'll start with group 1 that's in section C2.
Dr. Todd, I'm part of that group, but can I ask a question real quick before we start?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask about when we're identifying the funding for the SCIP, are we going to do that? Can we do it in a chart form like we've done before where we identify the human capital and the funds and all of that and just put it in a big chart?
Actually, that's the way I prefer it.
Okay.
Because if you do it that way, you've got something, and that last column will tell you the cost, and that just makes it so simple. If you've got the chart of what the goal is, and then what you're going to do, your short-term goal, and what you're going to do, and who's going to do it, and then the fiscal and the human capital, and just put that actual cost. Yes, that's perfect. All right. Who's going to present from group 1?
It doesn't, I can share my screen. Hang on.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyra.
No problem. And Eleanor is at a game, so if she unmutes, you guys are going to hear a lot of noise, just a heads up.
All right.
Her kids have soccer practice.
I understand.
Okay. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So we'll start here with addressing the cyberbullying and bullying through the case study. Our Zoom discussion, our Zoom team had a great discussion just around the differences that are in our school districts with things already in place for cyberbullying and so on. So the main thing that we agreed upon was that there needs to be more education around it, whether that's for the staff, the parents, about, especially around the laws that regulate that. If my Zoom team wants to hop in at any time, just let me know.
We will.
Okay. And then we also talked about perhaps increasing the police presence around the building during the prom time, because I guess at the end of our presentation, you'll see that we agreed that she should let the boys go to the prom, but the safety of all the students needs to be taken into account. So maybe doing something like that would allow for that safety. And then everything needs to be documented through the law. So the veiled threat, we kind of had some questions as a Zoom team about whether or not it was, because the threat was not bodily harm. So it didn't, we just weren't sure if it indicated if it really was a veiled threat. But we did think either way that the comments were inappropriate, that she wouldn't have said that to her heterosexual students, and so she shouldn't have said that to them.
Sorry.
So we just figured that out, and then
And we talked about possibly her intent was to like give those boys a heads up about all the chaos that was brewing around the whole situation with the religious group. So we kind of agreed, we didn't feel like that it was a threat per se, but maybe it wasn't, it was mishandled, but it wasn't really a threat.
And what we really came to is that whatever she suggests to any one student should be a suggestion to all students. So if she's going to suggest that they wait to have a relationship, she should be saying that to every student within the building.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to remember all this, y'all. We did this like 13 days ago. So
yeah,
I understand.
Bear with us here. The other stuff that we talked about. Go ahead, Sharon. Go ahead.
But we recognize the difficult situation that it placed the principal in, because she was both trying to please her parents and also try to please, and she did publication that it would have had against the school.
oh.
So I think her solution to it, by suggesting it to the boys, we said didn't want to really school policy, and that's kind of how you have to redirect it to. I'm done.
Thank you, Sharon. We believed that Mary Lou does have responsibilities under the law, that she needs to protect everybody and provide equality for everyone. We said, obviously, everything we've been learning about due process and reading about, that her students have those due process rights, that the freedom of speech isn't shed at, their rights to that shouldn't be taken away from them, especially after they said they wanted to do some classes or some things around it, and she, obviously, they didn't like that. And then we talked more about like what's the school policy, and we talked about within our group that all of our districts kind of have different, whether some of them didn't have them at all, or to what extent they had policies on public displays of affection. And again, if you're not going to allow students to show those, then it needs to be every student across the board can't show those public displays of affection. So we talked about that. Sorry, let's see. We said that to the parents, that responding to the parents' concerns, again, I know like in my district, there are a lot of policies in place that can regulate that. Like you were talking earlier, Dr. Todd, in our district, calling the zone and talking to your zone superintendent is pretty much the first thing that we're suggested to do in almost all the situations that we come across. So Mary Lou should first consult with the superintendent or the zone superintendent. And then my school also has a legal team that we can call or email anytime we're really uncertain of something. So we just talked about doing that and following those legal advice from the team to ensure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then that she may want to inform the parents of what might happen if they do protest, just because there are implications for that.
And we talked about, I think, Sharon, it was you talking about how if it's off of school property, but as soon as they would step onto school property, along with that, then that might be the time that you have to call law enforcement. I think that was you, Sharon, sharing that.
I think it was Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, like we said, that we believed that Mary Lou should allow the couple to attend the prom. By law, they can't ban students from prom. Increased police presence might prevent any violence or anything happening at the prom, just to be proactive. And then again, if she requests that those students should refrain from PDA, then she needs to request that from all students. And you know, what I think we all really agreed on is that what it comes down to is providing, being fair and equitable to all of us.
Equitable. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
And that was it.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyra.
No problem. Let me figure. Oh, there. Stop. No problem. There we go. I stopped sharing. Okay.
All right. Someone from Group 1 in Section 4, if you will share your screen and talk about what your group decided.
I'm attempting to do that. Let's see if you see it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So a lot of the same conversations, I don't know, I hope you can hear me. My mic isn't the greatest. A lot of the same conversations were had in our group. Angelique, you want to chime in on
Yes. Okay. So some of the same kind of things I put up here, that a threat is an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence. And so we didn't feel that she made a threat to the to anyone. She was just stating basically what she feared could happen based on what was going on. The parents doing the boycott and signing petitions, and so everything is kind of moving along in the wrong direction. And so as a principal, we said she should choose her words carefully, contact the district about those parental concerns. And then in the book, the school law book, even though she has these fears, it states that the fear and apprehension of disturbance is not enough to restrict the freedom of expression. So she's kind of breaking the law, or almost kind of going against their rights to have freedom of expression. So she definitely needs to get with the district, and because they have the right to talk about what they want to do.
So one of the things that we were also asked to discuss were Jerry and Cindy Hudson and responding to them. And it's clear that there are some concerns that have religious base to their complaints. And I think that separation of school and religion is a fine line. And I think Mary Lou's response to them has to be very careful. We also talked about the same thing as the other group, that not discouraging the relationship between the two students, that's not Mary Lou's place to do so, and that she should be more concerned about the rights of every student, being and fearful of trampling the rights of the students by caving to the Hudsons, and that the legal advice from at the county level should be her primary concern.
And she shouldn't let her own opinion come out. She shouldn't be biased.
Hmm. I think.
Sorry, Angelique. Do you want me to go ahead and do this one?
Yeah, I was gonna say Tiffany was gonna talk, but she just texted and said something about her mute things not working or something. So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. About how we could minimize and address bullying and cyberbullying I said that clear guidelines should be detailed so that everyone knows what is considered bullying and cyberbullying. Because even in elementary school, we still have to talk daily about this is what's considered bullying.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that a curriculum should be set in place in the school to model good citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
The school climate should be positive, where they have trusting, respectful relationships with the students and staff. And that if there are any complaints about bullying, an investigation should start happening right away.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, y'all?
I think that's it.
All right, group 4 of section 2.
I'm sharing it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm here, but I have my 22-month-old who's having a tantrum, so I'm going to mute, but I am here. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay. So, Sandra and I did case study 3, and we found, can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. So, considering Mary Lou a veiled threat, we said that she was not considered that. Her remarks were mainly based on the safety of all students for the learning environment, but it couldn't restrict Jimmy and Willie's rights under the First Amendment. We also talked about how she could have been clearer and explained to the parents as to why she made the comments she made, so the parents wouldn't have felt threatened. The responsibilities under the laws, we decided that the first steps would be to consult with the superintendent, board attorney, public relations personnel, because that's an issue that's so sensitive, and especially if she's never had a situation like this before, then she would need to see what steps that she would need to take so she doesn't cross any lines or get herself in trouble. So she would need to understand the rights as well under the laws and what action she can actually take as the principal. We talked about the Equal Access Act. Schools may not deny equal access to or discriminate against any group. So even though that was new to the school, to having Willie and Jimmy, then they still can't discriminate against them. And they couldn't not let them have events or activities outside of school or after school based on just angry parents or students. We also talked about how the school districts and schools do have policies for public displays of affection. So I'm sure that there were some there for that. She could have talked to the parents about that as well. You know, instead of what she said, she could have taken it a step further and said, well, this is our policy about public display of affection, and you know, that's okay if that's what they're going to do because that's their right, but this is our policy on the public display of affection, and this is for all students, not just them.
We wanted to make sure that we being equitable and being fair, so that we're singling the male students out. So making sure that she emphasized policy for all students is something that we definitely talked about a lot during our Zoom session, but to stress as well.
Right. How should she respond to Jerry and Cindy Hudson? Of course, consult with the board attorney, figure out what she needs to say, because she also doesn't want to overstep that and have issues concerning that. And also that the couple, you know, would attend prom because you cannot deny one's gender expression. And any threat they make as far as boycotting the prom would be no reason to cancel it. So even though I know in the case study they talked about, well, the prom would be canceled if, you know, that wouldn't be a reason to do that. And we didn't put this in here, but we talked about the presence of police would need to just be there, and there would be a to do that. And then we already said that they should attend the prom, but I think that Mary Lou would need to devise a plan that protects all the students' rights and a safe environment for all of them, so that the prom is fun and safe for everyone. And so really making sure that there's safety plans in place in case something does happen. How to minimize bullying and cyberbullying. We talked about educating the community about their responsibility of their devices. We actually had an issue with this recently. I think I put in my reflection about the example, but having parents sign a digital citizenship responsibilities form, that's the students and parents. So they already know what the guidelines are and what the school district expects. Have an assembly with students letting them know about all the forms of bullying, that all forms of bullying are wrong and not prohibited at school, and really just explaining to them, and the school counselors do a great job of explaining about bullying, but really a lot of cyberbullying is going on as well, and sometimes that can it's hard to identify. Explain to students and parents what bullying and cyberbullying is. We talked about this can be a misconception sometimes because just saying one thing to a student one time or not a nice thing doesn't necessarily mean you're bullying them. It needs to be a repeated action and a threat. So, and if there's so the behavior is repeated, and we just I just talked about what cyberbullying was, and it is hard to identify, but I think there's proof behind it, especially with screenshots, and there is a way to catch cyberbullying. But I think parents and students have to know when to show their parents their cell phone or whatnot in order to really be able to handle the situation.
All right.
That's ours.
Okay. Did your last slide, did you have anything on that, or did you already show that? You already showed that.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Section 4, Group 3.
Oh, get on this.
I do apologize. I did not read the agenda until after I'd already left my daughter's softball practice.
Okay.
And so we're out here. One of my group members is at a concert for her school, and the other one is preparing for his art show next week.
Okay.
So if it's possible, if we could send you the email tomorrow night. The PowerPoint.
That will be fine. Can you just tell our group a little bit about what you all decided was the important points to remember?
Kind of a lot of the same thing that we've heard so far, and the fact that what the principal did, she was caving to pressure of a few, and she needed to kind of be able to stand strong and talk to those above her to figure out. I agree. We agreed on having a stronger police presence, but also being fair to all. And sometimes being fair to all doesn't mean doing the same for all. And so we talked about a lot of those differences and how you got to make sure you have policy to back you up so that when you have those conversations, you can talk to the parents and say, this is our policy.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, just go ahead and send that to me then.
Yes, ma'am.
Section 2 of Group 3.
Is that us? Is that my group?
Yes.
Okay. I'll share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Oh, sorry. Dogs and children. Okay. So our group spoke about basically what every other group talked about as well. And let's see. We did not feel that the principal's comments were in any way a veiled threat. Like many of you, we believe that The principal was mainly just concerned for everyone's safety, avoiding conflict, and like what many of you said, concerned with equity for all students. And or we were concerned about whether or not the principal's statements would be equitable. If we were talking about a heterosexual couple, would the same statements have been made? That was kind of our concern on that part. Let's see. As far as legal responsibilities, we connected it back to what we had read in the chapter, and we felt like the right to symbolic expression that we read about was kind of similar to what was protecting the students and their right to have their relationship and be open with their relationship. But like many of you, we discussed how schools have policies about public displays of affection, and that maybe the principal should have leaned more toward that instead of, you know, the relationship and the content of the relationship. We also tried to find something in the reading that kind of paired with the parents and their concerns, and we kind of saw that as part of that heckler's veto that we read about. We also talked about how those legal responsibilities, like you all said, also continue to circle back around to that equity and also safety, as far as just the main ideas as far as what a principal must do in any situation, but especially in a situation like this. And as far as the parents' concerns, we felt like that it was important for the principal to really underline and underscore with those parents that it is not the position of a person or a school district to ever discriminate. And it doesn't really matter what a person's personal beliefs and opinions are on a matter, whether it be a relationship or gender issues, and that by the school not prohibiting it, that also didn't mean that they were trying to encourage it, that it just wasn't the school's place to take sides on that matter. Also, we felt like that the principal could say, you know, any student or parents who are uncomfortable with this decision, who do not want their children to be exposed to something that they're not comfortable with or that they don't agree with, that they are the ones who don't have to attend a function if they feel uncomfortable with it. They're not forced to go to the prom. And finally, we felt like the principal could not prohibit the boys from going to the prom together. That, you know, the principal's role is to enforce the rules as they are set. And if there is no rule that says that same gender couples can't go to the prom together, then there's no basis for the principal to make that decision. And let's see. Also, we discussed from our own personal experiences how you know, several of us work in high schools, and we will have same-sex couples come to prom all the time as friends or not as friends. There's no judgment made on that, and I guess it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell scenario in some places that might be a little more conservative, whereas in others, homosexual couples are openly able to come to prom with no questions asked.
I think you brought up a really good point there. And I don't know why I'm getting as sounding again, but you brought up a really good point when you said, I mean, I think back to when I was in school, which is many years ago, and I'm sure you all can think too. I'll bet you there were plenty of girls that came together as a group. It was not homosexual. It was not anything like that. They just didn't have a date. They wanted to go, and so they went together as a group. And guys did the same thing, and nobody thought anything about it. And so they weren't couples. They were just friends. And, you know, we used to see that all the time, and we never made a big deal about it because we didn't think anything about it. And I think sometimes we can make such a big thing out of something that they actually react more than they would have if we'd have just kept our mouth shut and moved on. So Sabrina, I think you're on target. You know, just let it go sometimes. Now, one of the things that I had a student several years ago when she was at an art school, and she said, I'll have students come in here one day and they tell me they're homosexual, and I look at them and say, I don't give a flip. Get over there and do your exercises that you're supposed to do for dance. And she said, then the next day they come in and say, oh, I'm not homosexual, I'm heterosexual. And she said, I really don't care. Get over there and do what you're supposed to. And she said, many times they're doing it to get a reaction from you. And what you need to do is just ignore it, or just say, it doesn't matter to me what you do, but you've got an assignment to do. As soon as you walk in this room and you know what it is, get over there and do it. So I think sometimes we can make a mountain out of a molehill, and then a lot of times that little molehill becomes the mountain whenever we try to deal with it, instead of just letting things take the course that they're going. All right, section 4, group 2. Tiffany, share your.
I think that is us.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so let me go to the first slide. Okay, so we just put the directions first, and then we put a couple of, I guess, the rules, and it says if you're planning to attend a prom or dance with the same sex date, you have a right to have fun, and the school must ensure your safety as it does of all students. And then that was that one. So then, would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? We said no. It was really expressed. It was as a concern, and they just didn't want the students to be at harm. And then my next one, my teammates want to do.
It's talking about what are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law. Her basic responsibility is to provide the students with the due process. She was supposed to address the code of conduct, depending on what it was, no matter whether it was a homosexual couple or a heterosexual couple. There should be no public displays of affection at school. So that should have covered everything. And all students must follow the student code of conduct. If anyone violates it, I'm reading from the screen, I'm sorry guys, then they must be given a consequence, no matter what the sex, what the whatever gender, their preference, let's put it that way.
Okay, the next one.
And then it says, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? She should definitely show compassion for their concern and not dismiss their concern, but at the same time she needs to adhere to the school rule and not personal views, just like everybody else has said, and she should refrain from any kind of leading to her opinion. So her opinion should not be expressed in any kind of way to them, because that might give them some, like, throwing fuel on the fire, good or bad. So she should just respond and refer to policy, basically, and not her personal beliefs or religious beliefs or anything like that. All that should be separate from school policy.
And then
the fourth question, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? She needs to remind the students of the policy about public display of affection, regardless of how the couples come, be it heterosexual or homosexual. It's their discretion, because the policies, that was the biggest concern, was the public display of affection. That was the problem. and it doesn't matter who displays affection, it should follow the law for whatever the policy is at that time.
And then the last one was just like student behavior and student speech and expression. And I'm at an elementary school, so I don't really have these problems. But my sister is at a high school, which is about an hour away. So I called her and asked her, I was like, what would you guys do? And, she let me talk to the principal there. And, it's just so different being like in the elementary world or, considered to the high school, because there are so many just different problems and this and that. This I've never seen in elementary. But I mean, if I'm ever placed at a high school or something, then I need to know these rules and policies.
And Sheila and I both work in a middle school, so it's almost like anything goes.
Right.
They see a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you just have to have policies to address it all.
Well, when you're in the lower grades like Kelly is, the boys don't like the girls and the girls don't like the boys.
They don't.
So you're dealing with a whole different set of dynamics, and really the homosexual or heterosexual is not even the issue at that point. Middle school is where it's beginning to start trying to figure out who they are. And then in high school, and sometimes it takes even after high school.
And my middle school in particularly, we start at 7th grade as opposed to 6th. Our 6th graders are still at the elementary school. So it's even a little bit more difficult, we feel, because they haven't really had time to transition as best as they probably would have if they would have been there their 6th grade year.
Right. Yeah. And you're not by yourself there, because I know of 2 systems in the western part of the state that have K-6 schools, and it was because of money. They didn't have enough money to build middle schools, or the schools that they had when they revamped them. They were not big enough to house the 6th grade. So economics plays a big part sometimes in what a school winds up being.
And not only that, I'm in a very rural community, and they do not want to let 6th graders leave the elementary school. They feel like it would be a bigger problem.
Oh, I've heard all of those. Every one of those things I've heard in meetings for years. And I'm always surprised. I have to laugh about it, because I heard the same thing when they were talking about 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders being in a school by themselves. I'm hearing the exact same thing, because they do have space now, and they're looking at moving the 6th grade to a true middle school. And the same things that they were complaining about with 7th graders and little ones, they're now complaining about with 6th graders and the 8th graders. It's just, I just want to sit back sometimes and think, okay, could we ever figure out a way to do something without there being some complaint about student safety? Because that's what everybody comes up with, and it's just not looking at, how many real issues have you ever found on a bus, whether it was 8th graders and kindergartners? Most time the 8th graders will help with the kindergartners, or with the 8th graders on the bus with the high school. Most of the time the high school kids are going to sleep, and they don't really care what an 8th grader does. So it just lets you know people worry about things that they have no concept of what's happening in your school. Now, that doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. They do, but not the general rule. There's as much bad likely to happen in your community as there is at school, and probably more. All right, we're down to our last group, section 2, group 2.
So our group, I'm going to start with talking about bullying and cyberbullying.
Okay.
And we basically said, as a school leader, it's the job of the principal to make sure that the students are safe at all times. We would assume that there's some policy already in place at all schools for bullying or cyberbullying. And then students will be made aware of that policy, and possibly attend an assembly discussing the matter in length if this were to arise. I would imagine in most schools, policies are gone over at the beginning of the year, but with this situation, because something came up again, we would probably reinforce it and remind the students of the policy. Teachers would also be responsible for reinforcing the policy and relative information. And then we said the school would develop a program that would share weekly tips with the students. So some type of poster or bulletin or presentation. I'm at a middle school and we do character ed once a month. So that would be one way for us to do that. And then the last one about cyberbullying and bullying, make sure that all students and parents have assigned the acceptable use policy. Whether or not, we had a lot of discussion about this and whether or not Mary Lou's comment was a veiled threat. So you can see the two bullets here. Her initial comment, we said, was directly in line with the First Amendment, which states that the rights are protected only so as long as they do not substantially disrupt the education process, which we did not feel that anything, well, I don't know, I won't say all of us, there was discussion about whether or not what they were doing actually disrupted the education process. However, when she asked them to hold off on their relationship until after graduation, that may have been unnecessary, but it was definitely not a threat. She was basically considering the safety of the school. Another view was that there was no evidence brought to her that insinuated that there would be violence brought towards the boys. The information that was presented in the case study didn't necessarily tell us that the students were planning anything. It was just her comment. The only thing that we were provided with was that the students were planning to boycott the prom. And I believe one of my team members just
That's me. So what are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? First and foremost, she's there to protect her students on both sides of the conversation. Allowing the boys to go to prom, you know, it could be an issue. It could not. We were still undecided on everything. We had a long discussion on this. The students do have a right to assemble. However, they cannot disrupt the school. And I feel like we came to a consensus that as long as it's not disrupting the classroom, they're holding the clubs, committees, then there shouldn't be any problem with that. So the principal should support that. Is that Angela?
Angela, yeah. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read this one. When we said, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? Her response should be based on school policy alone concerning the students and their safety. And she should let them know, I guess, when Mary or Jerry and Cindy made the comments, and I don't have it right in front of me, but they were offensive and unacceptable. But again, as principal, her actions should be based on the school policy. And then last, should they be allowed to attend prom? We said there are students at the school and they should be allowed to participate in activities just as the other students to avoid discrimination. I believe several groups mentioned this already, that if there was anyone that didn't want to attend the prom, it should be the students who were planning to boycott. If they wanted to boycott, that was their option, but these students should not be excluded from the prom. And the part about the display of public affection, of course, we would assume they're breaking the school rules, because there shouldn't be any display of public affection, which means that rule would be in place for all students, not just Jimmy and Willie.
All right.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So just to make sure I am commenting on with my group, we did have a really serious conversation, and a lot of it, I would say, we could not reach an agreement because we felt differently, and we have to realize that's how the principal felt. You know, sometimes you get your personal feelings involved because of whatever reasons, but at the end of the day, we got to look at the safety of the student, school policy, and that we should treat everybody equally. There should not be any discrimination. I think she was trying to save face. I think she was trying to make sure that The community didn't come against her. You know, when you consider what type of community people live in, it kind of changed the way you may perceive things to be, or how you may respond to things. May not even be how you really feel, but if the community as a whole is against something, you as the principal, you may change the way you feel about things. But as I said, if you stick to policy, you can't go wrong. I don't care who come against you, you are not breaking the law. If you're making sure that those students are safe, that you're treating them all equally. One of the things that I mentioned, and I think I wrote it to Dr. Todd, I said to her that we should treat everybody as we want to be treated. And I don't think you can go wrong if you do that. If you're going to treat people like you want to be treated, I don't think you want to be attacked. I don't think you want to be abused. I don't think you want to be discriminated against. So in saying that, if we would treat people exactly how we want to be treated, I don't think you would cross any lines. So as a principal, we have to consider that as well.
In reading some of your responses to I can't remember whether it was the discussion board or your reflections. I think it was one of your reflections. I think one of the key points is you all may, as a person, as a religious belief, you may have different opinions from what the law says that you will follow. If depending on how strong your religious beliefs are, it may be that you would be better served to be in a private school that is run by a religious community. You have those options, you know, and no one is asking you to change how you feel, but you do, if you work in a public school, then you do have a responsibility to follow the laws and to follow the rules that your school system has set forth in their policies. So that's sometimes that you have to, if you're in a public school and a public setting, sometimes you have to separate your own personal beliefs and go by the law. And I think that's what Angela was trying to say to us. And sometimes it can be really hard. And it can be so hard for you that you question whether you're doing the right thing, not for that situation, but for yourself personally. And only you can answer that. All right, I just want to commend all of you on the fact that your presentations were very well done and they were very creative. And while many of you had some of the same ideas, you still had different ways that you looked at it. So thank you so very much. Now I'm going to stop the recording. And if anyone wanted, Angela, were you wanting to talk to Dr. Tillman?
Yes.
Anybody else is welcome to stay, and I will just stop the recording. And I'm going to stay on too to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you want to leave, you're welcome to leave. I'm going to stop the recording.